Are you tired of hearing nothing but bad news? Tune into the good news of the gospel. Welcome to Good News with Greg Fritz.
Hello, I'm Greg Fritz, and welcome to the Good News program. I'm so glad to have you with me today. We're going to continue our teaching. We're answering the question, how come if God is God and there is a God, why is all this evil in the world and why doesn't He do something about it? I believe that people that sincerely want an answer to that question should have an answer, and we shouldn't avoid that. We shouldn't run from that. It's just sort of, it's not really fair to say that God's responsible for everything that happens in the world is God's doing, and that's really not the truth. And so we're taking time to deal with this issue and give real Bible answers to these questions, because obviously the world is in bad shape. There are tragedies and abuses happening all the time. There are injustices that go on every day, and the news is filled with these reports. So why, if there's a God, why is all this happening? And I don't want people to hide behind this question and stay away from God because of it. There's an answer, and we gave you the short answer, and the short answer is in 1 Peter 5:8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. So there is a devil, and he is a real entity. The Bible has much to say about the devil. In fact, it tells us so much about the devil, about as much about the devil as it does about God. There's much information in Old and New Testament about this evil being that has really aimed his aggression on the human race. And he will always be against God since he rebelled, and he will always try to destroy that which God loves. He's not going to change. And we looked at point number one about this issue of the devil. Point number one was that Satan was not created evil. He rebelled against God and he became evil. And that's an important point, because if people can't blame God for all the evil in the world, then they may want to blame Him for the devil, as if He created an evil being that has been terrorizing humanity ever since. But God didn't create the devil as an evil being. He created him holy. He created him as an angel. And when Satan rebelled, he changed. His nature changed. He was kicked out of heaven. He took a third of the angels with him. And he's literally set up his kingdom on the earth where he can promote destruction. What a terrible job to have, to be the chief destroyer. But that's what he does, and that's how he operates. And I want you to go to Ezekiel 28, and we'll look at some scriptures here that talk about Satan. And I'm not one of those preachers that spends all the time speaking about the devil and what he's done and who he is. But I felt like in our study of redemption, in our study of man's redemption, it's important to identify our enemy. And even the Bible, the New Testament, says we're not ignorant of his devices. So it's important to know what we're dealing with. We're not just dealing with people that have decided to be mean. We're not dealing with people who are insane. We're dealing with a devil that is behind the destruction in our world. And we get this history of where he came from in Ezekiel 28, verse 12. It says, Son of man, take up a lamentation for the king of Tyre, and say to him, Thus says the Lord God, You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Now you say, well, that was the king of Tyre. No, this is a prophetic statement, and you'll see here as we go on that it is referring not to a physical king of Tyre, but it's referring to the devil himself, because he goes on to say, You were in Eden, the garden of God. Well, there was only God, Adam and Eve, and the devil that were in the garden. And this isn't Adam and Eve here that he's talking about. He says, you were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. The sardius and topaz and diamond and the beryl and onyx and the jasper and sapphire, turquoise, emerald with gold. I mean, he was decked out. This was a beautiful created being. He began by saying, you were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. The reason I wanted to touch on this is because I don't want God to be blamed for the devil. The devil made his choice. Satan chose to rebel against God, and God had nothing to do with it. It's not God's fault that Satan chose to rebel. You say, yeah, but God knows everything, and He knew that He would. Yes, He does. But it's still not God's will for Satan to be here doing what he's doing. Adam invited Satan to stay here and set up his kingdom on earth, and we'll get to that later. But in both cases, God had nothing to do with it. God is consistent, and God is consistently good. And not only do I not like it when God gets blamed for things that He didn't do, but it's counterproductive. Because the enemy loves for God to get the blame, and then it turns people away from God, which fulfills his goal. He wants to divide God from people. He wants to destroy the human race. So God was not responsible for creating an evil devil, and God's not responsible for the fact that Satan is here having his kingdom set up on earth. Adam is responsible for that. So these are short explanations, and we'll go into them more as we get through this. But I want to read on. It says, after he listed all those precious stones, he said, the workmanship of your timbrels and pipes was prepared for you on the day you were created. So he has not God. He hasn't lived forever. And now He is an eternal being. He will live forever, but He hasn't lived forever like God. He was a created being, and God created him. You are the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You are on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. This is Ezekiel 28, and this is verse 15. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created till iniquity was found in you. Isn't that a powerful truth to know that even the devil was perfect when God made him, but iniquity was found in him. And the iniquity that God found in him came from his own pride and his own rebellion. It says in verse 16, by the abundance of your trading you became filled with violence within, and you sinned. Therefore I cast you out as a profane thing out of the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, O covering cherub, from the midst of the fiery stones. So Satan walked in holy places. Some theologians believe that he was an archangel, that he was at the highest point of the angelic beings. And archangels being only two that we know of, Gabriel and Michael. And then some theologians believe that God created three archangels. One was Gabriel, one was Michael, and one was Lucifer. And when Satan fell, he took a third of the angels with him, as if maybe he was over a third of the angels. These are speculations, but it is interesting. But he walked in holy places. He became filled with violence, and iniquity was found in him. It wasn't put in him. It wasn't created that way, but it was found in him. And then it says in verse 17, your heart was lifted up because of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. So there you go. He was so beautiful that he thought he was more than he was. And he was so beautiful that it went to his head. And he began to think that he was like God. And God had to deal with that. You know, God never sweeps sin under the rug. God's not this big grandfather in the sky that doesn't really care what anybody does and He just gets along with everyone. He will not compromise. He's a holy God. And sin has to be dealt with. In Satan's case, he couldn't be redeemed. Now, I'm not sure the answer to why, but he could not be. He was irredeemable, so God had to cast him out of heaven as evil. When man sinned, God didn't ignore it either. First of all, Adam was cast out of the garden, and then man had to relate to God on a very distant level for generations. And then the temple was introduced and the blood of animals was used, but it was still a very distant relationship until Jesus came. So sin has never been something that God has ignored or taken lightly. It's evil. It's very, very damaging. So when Satan sinned, God couldn't just say, well, that's okay. I need to, let me just give you a talk and help you change your mind and see the error of your ways. It was an eternal choice, and his nature changed, and God cast him out of heaven. And he goes on to say, I cast you to the ground. I laid you before kings that they may gaze at you. You defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities, by the iniquity of your trading. Therefore I brought fire from your midst. It devoured you, and I turned you to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all who saw you. All who knew you among the people are astonished at you, and you've become a horror and shall be no more forever. He's eventually going to be cast into the lake of fire, and he'll never be heard from again. But right now, we live in a world where there's a devil, and that's not new news. I know that, but it helps us to make sense of things. It helps us to kind of find a balance. When we know there's a God and we know there's a devil, we know there's a heaven, we know there's a hell, we know there's right and there's wrong. We know that in the universe we live in, there are opposing forces. And so to know that there's a devil helps us to understand why we've experienced tragedy, why we've experienced pain. There's nobody in the world that's ever been born since Adam and Eve that hasn't felt the pain of sin and the influence of evil forces in their life. When they blame that on God, it drives a wedge between them and God. He's the only one that can help and restore and redeem and change. And when people blame God for what the devil and sin do, it creates more heartache and it creates more alienation. And it's just lies that stand between people and the Savior. And so we want to do what we can to eliminate that. And so if you could bear with me, I'm going to talk about the devil and what he's doing. But I want to let you know the good news is he's a defeated foe. As far as the church is concerned, we have authority over him. However, he's not out of a job. He's still here, he's still working, still tempting, seducing, and deceiving. And he will be doing that until this age is over. So that's kind of the world we live in, and we might as well, be realistic about it. Let me take you to Isaiah 14, and we read this in the last program. I want to cover it again. In Isaiah 14 and verse 12, how are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? So this kind of connects with that passage in Ezekiel where it says he was perfect until iniquity was found. Well, here's what happened. He fell from heaven. He's cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations. And here's where it all started. You said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of the congregation on the furthest sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. So we call that the devil's 5 I wills. And as far as we can tell, what seduced him to think this way was his beauty. And he failed to realize that he was beautiful because God created him beautiful. God gave him his beauty. God gave him everything. And he turned that against God, and he's never been the same since. Now, the world could have escaped the terror of the devil if Adam and Eve hadn't yielded to his temptation in the garden. The world would have never been plunged into sin if Adam had taken his authority and stood against this enemy of humanity in the garden. But you know that he didn't. You know that he yielded. Adam and Eve yielded to temptation, and they literally invited the devil to stay, to set up his kingdom on the earth. They didn't have to do that. God clearly gave Adam and Eve dominion. He told them, I'm giving you dominion to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. He gave them authority. That means everything on the earth had to obey them, including that serpent in the garden. So the fact that they yielded to his temptation or they accepted his offer has plunged us into this situation we're in. It's allowed Satan to come set up his kingdom on the earth and operate the way he has. But God is still operating. God is still doing what he does. So you see in the world at the same time blessings and curses. You see at the same time people being blessed and people being hurt. You see people living and dying. You see people being saved and changed, and you see people being destroyed. That's because there is a devil and there is a kingdom of darkness that's set up in this world, and it's very real. Our job as Christians is to help deliver people from darkness. And you do that by giving them the truth. And once they accept Jesus, they become delivered. Colossians 1:13 says we're delivered from the power of darkness and translated into the kingdom of His dear Son. So there is escape from the devil's dominion. There is a way out of his world, his dominion, his kingdom, but it's through Jesus Christ. So I'm getting ahead of myself because I really just want to make some points about Satan and the devil. And in doing so, what we're going to do is exalt God. We're going to give credit where credit is due. And we're going to give God the glory and the credit for what He's doing on the earth. And we're going to point the blame at the devil for what he's doing on the earth. That alone would set some people free. Some people are bound today because they're blaming God for things that the devil did. They're blaming God for things that God had nothing to do with. And they cannot figure it out. They can't understand it. And so they just kind of take the default and just blame God. That's easy to do. Oh, sure, it's easy to blame God for everything. He's not going to defend Himself. He's not going to come down here and explain it. But He has given us an explanation in His Word, and it's very clear, and we can answer this question. And frankly, the world deserves an answer. They need to know that they're under the dominion of an enemy, someone who hates them, and someone that wants their destruction. So we made this first point, and we're going to move on. But the first point is that Satan was not created evil. He wasn't. He was created good, beautiful, and pure, and holy. This just means that God didn't make a devil the way we see him today. He rebelled against God and his nature changed. Point number 2 is it's the devil that's responsible for the evil on the earth. The devil is responsible. In other words, there's a lot of things that happen in this world that are not right, that are not fair, that are abusive and unjust. And these things go on, and God's not the author of it. Jesus made it very clear in John 10:10. He said, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. So the good news is God is here doing the good. God is here to heal and to bless and to deliver. And if it destroys and steals and kills, it's of the devil. And I know that's pretty simple, but it's true, and it would help people if they would keep the two straight. Too many times God gets blamed for what the devil does, and the devil gets totally ignored and overlooked. But he is working against humanity. So it's easier to understand life and the world as we view it from our perspective by saying it this way. If it heals, if it blesses, if it delivers, if it's good, God did it. If it's evil and it destroys and it hurts and it kills, The devil did it. The devil's responsible. And you would be amazed at how many people get this mixed up. In fact, Jesus said this in Luke chapter 9, and it's a great story that helps us to update to New Testament thinking. And I want you to consider this for a moment. The disciples were with Jesus and they went into a city. It's in Luke chapter 9, and they didn't receive Jesus. The people ignored him and they went about their business. And that really irritated James and John. They looked at each other and they said, you know what, this is not right. I don't appreciate this disrespect. And they went to Jesus and they said, Jesus, do you want us to call down fire from heaven and to destroy them like Elijah did? They were serious. In fact, it's like we've got Bible, we've got scripture and verse. They were coming to Jesus who had only blessed and healed and helped, and it was like they were ready for the Lord to do something else. It's like, Lord, all you're doing is blessing people and helping people and healing people. No wonder they don't respect you. You want some respect? Kill some people. In fact, let us do it. If you would just let us, we'll call down fire from heaven like Elijah did. Well, if you read that story, Elijah called down fire and it killed the captain and his men. And he did that like 5 times. There was like 250 people killed. 200 people killed by Elijah calling down fire from heaven. And this is what James and John wanted. They wanted to do this. And I guarantee you it would have brought respect to the ministry. That's all they were thinking is, you kill a few people and the next town you go into, they're going to listen. They're not going to treat you like this. And we need this respect. And Jesus said something that we need to remember because it's New Testament. And I'm going to kind of paraphrase what he said, but what he's saying is this, guys, we don't live like that anymore. You're not supposed to do what Elijah did. Those were days of legalism and justice and judgment. That's Old Testament, Old Covenant. This is a new day. We got a new message. What he said was this. He said, you know not what spirit you're of. And that gets us back to our subject. Listen, Jesus came to heal and deliver and help and bless, and the devil came to destroy and to kill and to steal. Don't get them mixed up. And that's kind of what Jesus was saying. He's saying, you don't even know what spirit you're of. Here you are following me, and now you've gone off with the wrong spirit. You want to kill people. He said, the Son of Man has not come to destroy men's lives, but that they might be saved. That's a New Testament verse right there. That is a New Testament vision. What he's saying is, if I wanted to kill people, I would have never left heaven. I could judge people from the right hand of God. It would be the easiest thing in the world to send judgment to the world. It'd be the easiest thing in the world to give sinners and to recompense them, give them what they deserve. To destroy and send them to hell. That would have been easy. And what Jesus was saying was, you guys have missed the whole point of the New Testament. You don't really know why I came. I did not leave heaven and become a man and walk these dusty streets and deal with you guys. I didn't do all that so I could kill people. That's not my job. That's not my mission. That's not my message. I came that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. What he was saying was, get your message straight. Don't be a messenger of the devil. Don't blame God for what the devil did. Don't get into this judgment and recompense spirit. And it's so easy to do that. It's so easy to get angry and bitter. But that's not New Testament. We are ministers of reconciliation, and we're living in a dispensation of grace. We're here to heal people and bless people, change people. God, our God, is a loving God. He's a good God. And what He does is bless and help. If it steals and kills and destroys, it's not of God. God's a good God. The devil's a bad devil. I like something John Osteen said, and I've never forgotten it. He said, if I was God, I'd kill the devil. I love that statement. I understand his sentiment. There's nothing good about the devil. He's our enemy, and that'll never change. Now, We can't kill him, but it would sure be nice if we could, because he's caused nothing but trouble since he showed up here. We need to keep it straight. We need to keep our message right and keep our columns separated. God's good, the devil's bad. If it's bad, it goes here. If it's good, it goes here. And that way, you're not holding bitterness and anger toward God, who is really not responsible for your problems. Anything that we face in life came as a result of sin, the devil, or our own choices. God's not responsible for it. God is the answer. He's not the problem. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this message today. I know we spent time talking about the devil, but I tried to do it in a positive way because he's a defeated foe. All he can do is deceive and trick and seduce. He has no power like God. God's the deliverer. God does the real work in the earth to heal, to deliver, to save. And we've got good news. We got a good message. I'm so glad you were with me today, and I look forward to being with you again on the next program. We're going to take this on, and believe me, it gets better and better until the end is beyond your imagination. So stick with me and join me on the next program. Until then, may God's best be yours.
Victory over opposition is ours through Jesus, but it's not automatic. In these very practical teachings, you'll learn how to have victory over the devil, the world, and our flesh. Order your copy of this series by visiting our website, gregfritz.org. Want more good news? Visit our website anytime, gregfritz.org, for more teaching materials. That's gregfritz.org.
I hope you're enjoying the teaching on this program. If you'd like to help me continue to make these programs and get this good news out to the world, you could do me a big favor and go to my website, go to the donate button, and choose to either give a one-time gift or become a monthly partner. Our ministry is a small ministry, and your gifts make a huge difference. If you could work it into your budget for the next 12 months to support us monthly, we would know we could count on that, and we can plan accordingly and continue to make these programs that'll reach the world. Thank you for tuning in. I thank you for listening to the teaching. I hope it's been a blessing to you. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I'm enjoying bringing it to you. So consider being a partner or giving a one-time gift, and I'll look forward to being with you again on the next show.
Visit our website, gregfritz.org, and become a partner today. Coming up next on Good News with Greg Fritz.
You've also heard this statement, well, everything happens for a reason. And most of the time they're referring to something bad, some tragedy, some accident. In fact, I was with somebody the other day, and sometimes people tend to be a little more spiritual than they normally would be around a preacher, and I understand that. But he had had a $10,000 mistake. He had lost a piece of equipment that cost $10,000, and he was trying to cope with it. And I mean, that's a tragedy. And his statement was, well, everything happens for a reason. Well, as if God did that to teach him something. I believe God has better ways of teaching than to hurt us or hurt our bank account or hurt our children.
Join us next time for Good News with Greg Fritz.